It's the summer of 1983. Across the country, life is still largely analog. Families do not have security cameras outside their homes. Stores are not recording every corner. There are no cell phones in kids' backpacks. No location sharing, texts, or pings. So if something happened, the story depends on the people who were around, what they saw, what they thought they saw, and what they did not realize mattered until later. In Louisville, Kentucky, the first day of June feels ordinary. School's out, and the summer weather is in full swing. Kids are moving through neighborhoods, community centers, shopping malls, and parking lots with the kind of freedom that was completely normal then. The kind of freedom that did not feel dangerous until something went wrong. It's the first day of Ann's summer break. She is with a friend and her mother calls. It's time to come home. So the girls leave on their bikes and ride toward the Bashford Manor Mall parking lot. It's a midway point. Ann's friend says goodbye. Ann waves back and keeps riding ahead. According to that friend, this is the last confirmed moment she ever saw Ann. Hours later, Ann's bicycle is found outside the mall. But Ann is gone. And from that moment forward, Ann's case becomes a story of almost answers. Witnesses remember pieces of the evening, a man, a child, a field, a drainage ditch. Later, there will be phone calls, searches, and confessions that seem like they might finally lead somewhere. But none of it becomes enough. Not enough to explain what happened. And not enough to bring Ann home. Because on June 1st, 1983, a 12-year-old girl disappeared from a place that should have been familiar, a place that should have been safe. And more than 40 years later, her family is still waiting for the one piece of truth that can bring her home. I'm Sara Reid, and this is Sequestered Season 4. The year is 1983. We're in Louisville, Kentucky, and this is the Ann Gotlib Mystery. Her name was Ann Gotlib. She was 12 years old, about 5 feet tall, and weighed around 85 pounds. She had red curly hair, gray eyes, and freckles. In a case file, those details help describe a missing child. At home, they described a daughter. Her parents were Anatoly and Lyudmila Gotlib. Ann was their only child. The Gotlibs had immigrated to the United States from the Soviet Union just a few years earlier in 1980. They were part of a wave of Soviet Jewish families searching for freedom, safety, and the chance to build a life that did not have to be lived under fear. Ann was fluent in both Russian and English. She was an honors student. She loved writing. She composed music. She was curious about science. And the people who knew her described her as bright, focused, serious, and deeply loved. Her parents would later say simply,
"She is our life."
On Wednesday, June 1st, Ann's day begins like many typical days do. She spends part of the afternoon at the Jewish Community Center on Dutchman's Lane. It's familiar, active. A place with families coming and going, kids moving through the building, staff nearby. The kind of place a parent trusts because it's part of the rhythm of their everyday life. But later, investigators would come back to that afternoon because earlier that day, another young girl at the Jewish Community Center had reported a disturbing encounter with a man. At the time, it was treated as a separate incident. Within hours, that detail would feel very different, though. Later that day, Ann is with a friend at an apartment not far from her home. They had been there for about an hour when Ann's mother calls and tells her it's time to come home. So the girls leave the apartment, get on their bikes, and ride together down Bashford Manor Lane, toward Bashford Manor Mall. Ann's own apartment complex is nearby on Gerald Court. This is not a long ride across town. It's a short route down familiar streets. From her friend's apartment to the mall parking lot and then toward home, we're talking less than a mile altogether. Close enough that the entire story begins inside a small radius of ordinary places. A community center, a friend's apartment, a mall parking lot, and a short bike ride home. Around 5:30 that evening, the girls reach the mall parking lot and go their separate ways. It's one of those tiny moments that only becomes important later. A goodbye, a wave, a child continuing on alone. According to Ann's friend, this is the last time she ever saw her.
A lot of details of Ann's disappearance remain a mystery. Investigators do know the 12-year-old vanished on the first day of her summer break around 5:30 in the evening. She was visiting a friend not far from home.
They stayed there for about an hour or so. Ann's mother called, told Ann to come home. Both girls left the apartment and rolled down Bashford Manor Lane until they got to the parking lot of the Bashford Manor Mall at the time. My understanding, Ann's friend said, "I'll see you," waved goodbye to Ann.
And that was the last time anyone saw her.
There would later be reports of a possible sighting of Ann inside the mall, in a pet store playing with a kitten. But the firmer part of the timeline is this. Ann and her friend left her friend's apartment together. Her friend made it back home safely. Ann did not. And after that, there is no clear account of where she goes next. Ann is expected home by 6 p.m., but 6 o'clock comes and then goes, and Ann does not come home. At some point that night, the police are called, and not long after, they find something. Ann's bicycle. It's found near Bashford Manor Mall, close to the south end of the shopping center, leaning against a column outside of Beacon's department store. Beacon's was a longtime Louisville staple, the kind of department store that felt local, known, a place families had walked through for years. And it's important to note that Ann's bike was not just thrown down. It was placed, carefully enough that investigators would later question whether Ann had left it there herself. That bicycle becomes the first physical piece of the case, and for a long time, one of the only ones. In the hours and the days after Ann disappears, witnesses begin to come forward. And what they describe is troubling. Not because every account is clear, but because several of them seem to point toward the same general fear. That Ann did not simply ride away. That someone took her. According to reporting from the Courier-Journal, 2 teenage girls said they saw a man dragging a girl into a wooded area near a drainage ditch not far from the mall. Another witness described seeing a man pulling a girl across a field. Another sighting placed a man and a child near the road around the same time Ann disappeared. Investigators begin trying to map those sightings, trying to determine whether these people were describing the same moment from different angles or different moments entirely. Trying to answer the question that still sits underneath all of it. Was the girl they saw Ann?
We showed you notes from the file detailing reported Ann Gotlib sightings. Some took FBI agents all the way to New York. Shay McAllister has been going through the records piece by piece. And Shay, what more are you discovering in those police files?
Well, Doug, we just have tons to work through. Over the past 4 decades since Gotlib first disappeared, LMPD has collected 7 boxes of evidence. That's everything from VHS tapes to police reports, handwritten notes, and photographs. And tonight, we take a look at some of those still images captured, the places detectives were sent on leads for Gotlib right after she disappeared. Inside the Ann Gotlib case file, 6 photos show what appeared to be one of the first locations searched. A handwritten note provides the only details we have, stating the report was made on June 1st, 1983. A tip from an informant led detectives to this remote area in Louisville, where they searched a field. You see cattle in one picture, and then a photographer narrows in on a car with a popped trunk. We can't tell what's inside. Thick woods surround the car, which is parked right off the side of the road. The note indicates the search was in connection to Ann Gotlib, a missing child, and because of the date, the same date she went missing, we can assume this search was one of the first.
That is what this case becomes almost immediately. Files, notes, photographs, search locations, fragments of what people thought they saw, and investigators trying to turn all of it into a sequence that would hold. Based on witness accounts, police release a composite sketch. A white man in his 40s, husky build, loose-fitting work pants, a white t-shirt, and a light-colored hat. It is the first attempt to give shape to the unknown, to turn fragments of memory into something the public can hopefully recognize. But memory is fragile, especially when a moment does not announce itself as important. No one watching a parking lot, a field, or a stretch of road that evening knew they might be witnessing the edge of a missing child case. They only knew something felt strange, something felt off. And only later did those fragments begin to matter. In the days after Ann disappears, the search expands. Police, firefighters, volunteers, moving through the fields behind the mall, into drainage ditches, wooded patches, creek beds, places that one day earlier were just part of the landscape. Now, every patch of grass was searched, every ditch, every piece of debris, every place a child could be hidden. Searchers combed through shoulder-high grass. They turned over debris. They walked through water. They searched again and again, and they found nothing. No clothing, no physical evidence, no confirmed sighting, no confirmed sign of Ann. And the investigation circled the same problem over and over. There are sightings, there are descriptions, they have a composite, they even have her bicycle, but there's no clean sequence. No single witness who can say with certainty, this is what happened. At the very beginning, the case is already doing something investigators cannot control. It's breaking into pieces. When investigators work a case like this, they go backward. They retrace the day. They revisit every place Ann had been. They talk to anyone who might have seen something. And they look again at the details that may have seemed separate before Ann disappeared. That is how the incident at the Jewish Community Center starts to feel different. Remember the man we mentioned earlier? The one who approached a young girl at the community center the same afternoon? According to reporting at the time, he used vulgar language toward her. He grabbed her and tried to pull at her clothing before she was able to get away from him. At first, that was its own disturbing event. But now there is a missing child, and the question changes. Was that incident a warning? Was it connected? Or was it simply another terrible thing that happened in the same city on the same day? At the same time, police are hearing descriptions of a man around the mall that echo the composite they had already released. A white man in his 40s, husky build, a light-colored hat. The description matters because it seems to echo across more than one account. And then a name enters the investigation. Ralph Barry Barber. Barber was 43 years old, from Nicholasville, Kentucky, and he was not a random lead. He was already on law enforcement's radar. According to reporting at the time, he had been arrested in connection with sexual abuse allegations involving young girls, including incidents that took place on the very same day Ann disappeared. For investigators, the shape of this lead is obvious, and for a moment, it feels like the case may be narrowing. But the momentum stalls quickly because Barber says he was not there. According to reporting at the time, he tells police he was in Lexington that afternoon, dropping off an item at a trophy shop. Investigators check, and 3 separate employees confirm his alibi. Police cannot place him at the Bashford Manor Mall. They cannot tie him directly to Ann, and the lead that had seemed so promising slips away. And without evidence placing him with Ann, investigators had to keep looking. So the investigation opens back up. More tips come in, more theories, more sightings, more people who might have seen something, but nothing holds long enough to become proof. Then, a few days after Ann disappears, a man tells police he picked up a hitchhiker. The hitchhiker was not alone. There was a young girl with him. If that girl was Ann, it would change the case, because it would mean she may still have been alive, days after she vanished. It was early in the morning, around 5 a.m. A man was driving near the National Turnpike when a hitchhiker flagged him down. The man was not alone. He had a young girl with him. The driver tells police the girl matched Ann's general description. Same age, same appearance. He says he drove them south toward Shepherdsville. This feels like the first real movement in days, because if the sighting is accurate, it means Ann may have still been alive, days after she disappeared. But almost immediately, there is a problem. The clothing doesn't match. The girl the driver describes was wearing something different than what Ann was believed to have been wearing when she vanished. Police investigate. They follow the route. They check the area. And eventually, the lead fades. It's not confirmed. It's not fully disproven. It just doesn't hold. Then another lead comes in. This one feels different. According to reporting at the time, a rabbi in Louisville received a phone call. The man on the other end did not give his name, but the rabbi later described his voice as sincere, almost remorseful. According to the rabbi, the caller told him something very specific.
If police want to find Ann, they should look in a wooded area along Eastern Parkway.
The rabbi believed him enough to call the police, and police take the call seriously. They search the area carefully, thoroughly, but they find nothing. The caller says he will call again, but he never does. By this point, the emotional pattern is starting to take shape. A lead comes in, hope rises, investigators follow it as far as they can, and then the lead collapses. Years later, there would be more leads, more searches, more claims from people who said they knew what happened. More moments when the case seemed like it might finally move. But each one led back to the same place. No Ann, no charges, no proof. Hope doesn't disappear all at once in cases like this. It gets pulled forward by one lead at a time, and then broken again. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and then years. The investigation does not fully stop, but it changes. The urgency fades, calls slow down, public attention shifts to other headlines, and gradually the mystery of Ann Gotlib's disappearance becomes one of those cases a city never fully puts down. A case people remember, a case people talk about, a case that keeps returning whenever a new lead appears. Like in 1990, when another potential break in the case finally comes. A man named Michael Lee Lockhart, a convicted killer, tells investigators he knows what happened to Ann. He claims he killed her and says she is buried near Fort Knox. According to reporting from the Courier-Journal, search teams are sent to a remote area near Fort Knox. They dig, they search, they look for anything that could confirm what Lockhart claimed. And they find nothing. No remains, no physical evidence, absolutely nothing that brings Ann home. And as quickly as it came, that lead collapses too. By this point, the case has taken on a rhythm that no family should have to endure. Tips lead to theories about whether Ann had run away, theories about whether someone had taken her out of the country, theories tied to the Soviet Union and her family's immigration. But Ann's family rejected the idea that she left voluntarily. Investigators agreed and found no evidence that she had planned to run away. So the case remained what it had been from the beginning: a missing child, a bicycle, with multiple witness accounts, suspects, searches, and confessions, but with no proof strong enough to close the case. Then, decades later, the case takes another turn. And this time, it's not a rumor. It's not a psychic tip. It isn't a confession from someone the police cannot verify. This time, it's the Louisville Metro Police standing in front of cameras in 2008, naming the man they believed was responsible for Ann Gotlib's disappearance. His name was Gregory Louis Oakley, Jr.
But there was one lead, one suspect that's been named and connected to the case repeatedly: Gregory Oakley.
He was a suspect early on in the case. The problem was he had an alibi from his girlfriend. When he passed away, the girlfriend provided significant information to the police department, which implicated him in the case.
Oakley, who served time in prison for attempted rape, died of cancer. In 2008, Louisville Metro Police named Oakley a suspect, but prosecutors decided not to charge him posthumously. Since then, LMPD created a missing persons unit and reopened the case. They're now focused on one piece of evidence from the scene: Ann's bicycle.
There was a fingerprint taken off the bicycle that was reviewed through the records at the time with no match.
Missing Persons Detective Mike Perry plans to retest evidence gathered after her disappearance. Forensic testing has improved since the 80s, and the results may shed light on what happened to Ann.
This detail matters because even after police named Oakley as their prime suspect, the case did not truly end. There was still evidence. There was still Ann's bicycle, and there was still the possibility that something collected in 1983 might be able to say more now than it could say then. According to WAVE-3's reporting from that press conference, Oakley was originally from Alabama. By the early 80s, he had moved to Louisville and was working as a USDA meat inspector. And by the time police had named him publicly in 2008, he had been dead for 6 years. That is the first gut punch, because a name had finally been spoken out loud. But the man who could have been arrested, the man who could have been questioned, the man who could have been put on trial, was already gone. Oakley had served time in a Kentucky prison after a 1984 conviction for attempted rape and burglary. He was medically released from prison in June of 2002 after becoming ill. He returned to Alabama, and by October of that same year, he was dead. But the reason police named him in 2008 was not just because of his history. It was because after the 25th anniversary coverage of Ann's disappearance, new information started coming in. One of those people was a woman Oakley had been dating in 1983. She had told police about Oakley's activity on June 1st, the day Ann vanished. She said Oakley was supposed to have been out of town on the day in question. She also shared that later that evening, he asked her to wash the clothes he had been wearing. Then there was the prison confession. In September of 2008, an inmate who had served time with Oakley at the Kentucky State Reformatory told investigators that Oakley had confessed to killing Ann. The inmate said that Oakley claimed he killed Ann by injecting her with Talwin, which is a painkiller. Police said a polygraph indicated that the inmate was telling the truth. And then there was another piece, a piece that puts Oakley close to the place where Ann vanished. Bank records from the then Liberty National Bank showed that Oakley made an ATM transaction at the Bashford Manor branch at 3:50 p.m. on June 1st, 1983. That's less than 2 hours before Ann disappeared from the mall parking lot. Around 100 minutes to be exact. That is the kind of detail that changes the temperature of a case, not because it proves everything, but because it places him there, near the mall, on the same day before Ann was gone. And when police laid out Oakley's timeline, the pattern was horrifying. In July of 1979, while living in Alabama, Oakley was identified as a suspect in the attempted assault of a 13-year-old girl using a hypodermic needle. That victim fought him off and escaped. The same month, Oakley assaulted another 13-year-old girl in Alabama by injecting her with ketamine. In November of 1981, Oakley assaulted his own 13-year-old stepdaughter with Demerol. In the fall of 1982, Oakley moved to Louisville, Kentucky. On June 1st, 1983, at 3:50 p.m., he made that bank transaction at the Bashford Manor Mall. At around 5:30 p.m. that same day, Ann Gotlib disappeared from the mall parking lot. And then, just a few months later, in September of 1983, Oakley attempted to abduct 2 young girls who were walking to school along Goldsmith Lane, which was only several blocks away from Bashford Manor Mall. That same month, he assaulted a 13-year-old girl at her home on Maysmuir Court, which again was just several blocks from the mall. He would be convicted of this attack in 1984 and sent to prison for 30 years. Police would even give Oakley a polygraph test asking specifically about Ann Gotlib. Oakley failed that polygraph test. So, when Louisville Metro Police named Gregory Lewis Oakley Jr. in 2008, they were not pointing to one strange coincidence. They were pointing to a pattern. Young girls, hypodermic needles, drugs, attacks in 2 states, a bank transaction near Bashford Manor Mall less than 2 hours before Ann disappeared, a former girlfriend with information about that specific day, and a former cellmate who said Oakley confessed. This was the closest thing to an answer Ann's family had been given. And still, it did not bring Ann home, because Oakley was dead, and a dead man cannot be charged. He cannot be questioned. He cannot be put on trial, and he cannot be made to tell the truth. And that is the cruelty of this kind of almost answer. Because belief is not proof. A named suspect is not conviction. And naming a man after he is dead is not the same as finding Ann. Even after the 2008 announcement, her case remained open because Ann was still missing. When you go back to the beginning, Ann's disappearance feels like it should be easier to explain. A 12-year-old girl spends part of the afternoon with a friend. Her mother calls and tells her it's time to come home. Ann gets on her bike, rides to the mall parking lot, says goodbye to her friend, and continues on alone. And then the timeline breaks. Her bicycle is later found outside of a department store, but Ann is gone. What follows is a case built out of fragments. Witnesses who believe they saw something. Suspects with alibis, phone calls, searches, confessions. And decades later, it all comes back to one man police say they believe was responsible. But none of it brings Ann home. And that is where Ann's story becomes bigger than Louisville. Because her disappearance did not just leave one family searching. It became part of a national reckoning over how missing children were reported, investigated, and remembered. In the early 1980s, the country was still beginning to confront something it did not yet have a fully organized system to handle. Missing kids, abductions, cases that crossed city lines, county lines, state lines, and families who were trying to get attention without the tools we take for granted now. Ann's case became part of that national shift, a case that showed how quickly a child could disappear, how difficult it was to coordinate information, and how so much of it depended on local memory, local newspapers, local police work, and the hope that the right person would see the right flyer at the right time. Within a year of Ann's disappearance, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children would be created. Not because of one case alone, but because cases like Ann's made the need impossible to ignore. That matters, but it does not soften what happened. A system changed, a country learned, and Ann was still missing.
When the department and Commonwealth's attorney announced the case had been solved and that the man responsible, Greg Oakley, had already died in prison for unrelated charges, Ann's parents never saw proof. And in their words, it is unsolved.
We still don't have anything. Any resolve, no grave to put flowers on.
That is the part no system can fix retroactively. A national organization can be created, a case can be reopened, a suspect can be named, but Ann's parents still do not have their daughter. They do not have a grave. They don't have the ending they came to this country believing she would get to live. Today, Ann's face would be everywhere within hours. Push alerts, social media, surveillance images, digital maps, people sharing posts before the evening news ever came on. But in 1983, this story moved at a much slower rate. Through newspapers, television and radio broadcasts, phone calls and flyers, billboards, and word of mouth. And in a missing child case, slow is not neutral. Slow costs time, and time is everything.
I do know that it has affected a number of agents that worked the case. In fact, the case agent, who is now deceased, probably was driven into early retirement because of this case.
Ann Gotlib is a very strange case. I do believe it was an abduction. This case will never be closed and never out of our mind until Ann Gotlib is located.
Ann Gotlib has never been found. No one has been charged in her disappearance. And today, her case remains open with the Louisville Metro Police Department. If you have any information about the disappearance of Ann Gotlib, please contact the Louisville Metro Police Department at 502-574-LMPD. That's 502-574-5673. Even now, decades later, one detail could still matter. A memory, a name, a story someone heard. Something seen near Bashford Manor Mall on June 1st, 1983, that did not feel important at the time. And that includes vehicles. In 2008, police released images connected to Gregory Lewis Oakley Jr., including a photo of his 1970 Ford pickup. Public reporting does not confirm that truck was used in Ann's disappearance, but police considered it important enough to show. We have photos connected to Ann's case, including a photo of Oakley's truck, posted on our website at sequesteredpod.com. Sometimes the vehicle is what someone remembers. The color, the shape, where it was parked, who was driving it. Something that did not mean anything then, but could mean something now. Because Ann was not just a missing girl in an old case file. She was 12 years old. She was a daughter, an only child. A girl who had already lived through one kind of leaving when her family came to this country, hoping for a safer life. And then she vanished from the new life her family had come here to build. Whatever happened to Ann Gotlib, she deserves more than theories. She deserves more than almost answers. She deserves to be found. Next time on Sequestered, it's 1984 in Des Moines, Iowa. A 13-year-old paper boy heads out before dawn to deliver the morning route. His papers are found, his bag is found, but Eugene Martin is gone. And the closer investigators look, the more his disappearance begins to echo another case from the same city. Another boy, another paper route, another morning that never made sense. Sequestered is created by Sara Reid and Andrea Clyde. Hosted and produced by Sara, written and researched together.